Are you tired of boring podcasts? Are you tired of paneled and structured podcasts that make you want to watch paint dry? Do you want to listen to an adult-oriented show? Do you want to hear words like f***, or personal favorite, jungling thunder?
Droids Podcast. Offensive and off-topic since 2012. Insert unnecessary explosion.
What the? Come on, god damn it. Hold on. And... Oh shit!
Michael Bay!
To get radioactive treatment, go see your local physician after listening to this podcast. To listen to further podcasts, go to droidscanada.com.
Droids Canada Podcast. Please stand by.
I honestly, just before we get too started, had a couple good laughs watching your stuff.
Thank you. Thanks.
Absolutely. Not trying to, brown noses. I'm not a fucking brown noser whatsoever.
He's lying. No need to brown nose. You already got me on the show, so.
So, I guess we'll just get started with that.
Okay.
We got a little bit of crash course about you. I'm not to sound off or anything. I actually never heard about you before.
No. I barely have heard about myself. No.
But I could tell you that when I looked up your YouTube videos and stuff like that. I just listened to, was it the
Christmas taking over the calendar? From
Christmas
the new
taking?
album.
Holy shit!
You like that?
Oh, it's fucking hilarious. I couldn't stop laughing my ass off.
Oh, thanks. That's from the new album, and that's actually probably I think about 6-minute chunk out of a longer, probably 10 or 12-minute bit of the whole album is all throughout, that's part of a whole theme of a good amount of the album is that. So I'm glad you liked that.
Oh, it was definitely fantastic. So I guess you're joining into the podcast race. Is that what I am understanding now? Because you have
the movie preview review podcast.
Yeah.
No, not joining. Actually, I started my movie preview review podcast a few years ago, and have done it off and on. And we're now just this year we're now back in a permanent location and with a permanent team and a kind of a format that I really like. And so the old version is down off iTunes, and we're relaunching it this week with the new stuff, and we'll put a couple of the old, for lack of a better term, classic episodes on and mixed in there as well for people. But I started doing it, about 3 or 4 years ago, and originally the premise was that I would just take a movie that was coming out and review it based on only watching the previews. And back then it started with I was going to the movies one day, and I just finished a very lengthy, very involved process of writing for a thing for HBO and a couple other things right on top of each other. So I was really in this zone of give me a subject and I can sit and write page after page of jokes about it, and so that muscle was firm. And I was at the movies, and they ran a preview for the third Meet the Parents movie, Meet the Fockers, and then right after that, the sequel, I think, to Big Mama's House with Martin Lawrence, and I was just sitting there and just realized that, I could tell everything I needed to know about these two movies and how horrific they were just by watching them. And the name just kind of popped out at me, and so I first started. It was 10 to 15 minute episodes where it was just 15 minutes of jokes about the little Fockers or whatever, and then we did a bunch of those, and it became very popular. But it wasn't a sustainable format because I really needed an awful movie every week to do it funny. It's tough to make a good movie to do 15 minutes of trashing a really good film. And Adam Sandler only makes 1 or 2 movies a year, so that still leaves me 50 weeks where I got to come up with something. And plus, I didn't want to be doing the same jokes again and again, and I didn't want people to tune in and just think, okay, what's Kevin going to shit on this week? So I lost interest in doing it for a while, and then it came back on a serialized radio format, and then what stuck was this summer we started to do it in a basement of a comedy club, had a little podcast studio, and they asked me if I would do something, so I started doing it more as an interview show, so where it would be me and a guest, and then I brought in a couple of other comics, and I brought my wife in, and we kind of had it. So that's what we have now is where we watch a couple previews together, and I don't know, nobody at the table except for the producer knows what we'll be seeing, so it's all our genuine reactions to it, and just because we're funny people, we can crack wise, and now it has a feel of you're going to the movies with a few friends watching the previews, and everybody's kind of, just kind of cracking on it for a while. So it's a sustainable format, and it gives me a chance to have some really cool guests on, and so like I said, we're going to launch it this week. Hopefully, all the technical bugs are worked out, and we'll put those out, and then start throwing out some of those, the old format ones, so people who are just discovering it now can go back and we'll be able to hear the Little Fockers episode and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's definitely an ingenious idea now thinking about it, because I can honestly tell you with the Mountain Man here that he does the same thing too. He'll tear apart a trailer before we even start watching the goddamn movie. And I'm like,
exactly.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Everybody does. That's why right before the movie starts, they have to remind you to shut up.
Oh.
Because everybody's talking so much about it.
Or maybe a Sally seat kicker,
or
turn off your cell phones, and all
that
kind of stuff. Yeah.
And I like the mix of the core 4 people at the table outside of whoever the guest is each week. It's a balance. So we're all kind of into different movies and different tastes and stuff. So I was conscious of the fact that I really didn't want everybody shitting on every movie together. So my wife is there, and she's the only one who's not an actual stand-up comic on the panel, but she has some improv training stuff. But so she'll be there, and where I would hate the chick flicks and stuff, she sees it a different way. And the other guys at the table, they like the superhero movies and the nerd culture stuff, and more than I do. And I come across more as the everyday or the jock or the meathead a little bit in my taste comparatively. So it's a cool balance, So it's not always shitting on the movies. It turns into a conversation.
Definitely. I think we were just listening to the first podcast you put up, and the one guy was like, what was he talking about again? Sex robots?
Oh, talking about the daily robot pictures, and then
that was
posting them on Instagram, and
that's Jay. Yeah, that's not a really representative of the podcast, so that's just
no.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
But we were just even discussing it amongst ourselves that the way you guys have it set up, that everyone plays off of each other.
Exactly.
And we do pretty much the exact same thing on our end.
Right.
Everyone's got their own little taste and different directions that they want to go. And we were just talking about it. It's like we could be sitting at a coffee shop with all you guys.
Exactly.
It fit right in.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was shooting for the feel of it. I wanted the listener to feel like they were involved a little bit and just witnessing the conversation, and that could be your own friends.
It doesn't go too well in coffee shops, though. There's a couple times we did a couple podcasts. Like, shut the fuck up! I'm like, this is funny. You're ruining it.
Yeah.
I guess, and one thing I would talk about. Explain to me Carlin Way, how that came to be, because I'm really intrigued about that.
Sure. Basically, George Carlin Way. It was a project that I started almost 3.5 years ago now, and it was a campaign, just to briefly tell you, it was a campaign to get New York City to name a street after George Carlin, and specifically to name the street that he grew up on and lived on. And it's the same street that, if you're a Carlin fan and you listen to like Class Clown and Occupation Fool, those, when he's talking about his old neighborhood and stuff, it's all that street in that area. And it's an area of Manhattan called Morningside Heights, which George used to call White Harlem, and it's just south of 125th Street, and it's my neighborhood. I moved to this neighborhood like 12 or 13 years ago, not even realizing that it was, George Carlin's old neighborhood. And then he, when his posthumous autobiography, memoir, I guess you could say, came out, he did a couple chapters on the neighborhood, and he actually put the street, the actual physical address of the building he lived in. So I just walked over to the street one day, and I found the building just to make a little pilgrimage, and to check it out. And he'd been dead like 3 years at that point, and what struck me right away was you would have no idea that George Carlin had ever been there. Never mind grew up there and maintained a residence on that street for 40 plus years, and immortalized that neighborhood in his art, and was an ambassador for the neighborhood and all that. There was there's no little plaque on the building. The street wasn't named after him. There was no, pastrami sandwich at the deli named after him. No. So it seemed strange. So, anyway, I just got the idea basically at that point, a couple days later, that, somebody really ought to get the city to name a street. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever been in New York City, but just about every other street is named after somebody. And, right. For example, a comedy club that I play often, on West 53rd Street, that section of road is named after Jerry Orbach. And, nothing against Jerry Orbach. I'm sure he's a great guy. I'm sure his family loved him, and he sure was good on Law and Order. But are you telling me Jerry Orbach gets a street and George Carlin doesn't? It just made no sense. So, I started standing on the corner up there, getting people to sign a petition on a pad and paper petition, and it ended up being a 3-year campaign that we waged, and we ended up butting heads with the Catholic Church, who protested against us, and we had to have a real big public battle with them, and when they became involved, it became a national news story, and all of a sudden I'm on I'm in every paper in the city, and I had ABC News, outside my apartment waiting for me to come out to get interviews and stuff. It was really amazingly surreal. But we ended up prevailing, and just this past summer, the city council unanimously voted in favor of George Carlin Way, and then Mayor de Blasio signed it into law. And this October, we had a ceremony where we unveiled the sign, and it was an amazing day with a show that night at Caroline's, and attended by a who's who of New York's elite comedy scene. Everybody from Colin Quinn and Jim Norton and guys like that, and Dave Attell, all the way up to Robert Klein was there, and just an amazing thing. And I was, all just because I had this little fleeting idea 3 years ago. It became quite an odyssey.
You know what, and I have to congratulate on you. That's absolutely amazing. I honestly cannot think of anything that can really top it that I've ever done in my life.
No. Either. I've never. It's been my crowning achievement at this point, too.
Honestly, it sounds like something I would do. Just like, this is horse shit, and just this is happening now.
And this is the common man against the city of New York City.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, against the Catholic Church, really. The city.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. The city was never really a roadblock. And I knew he's very, George is beloved in New York and beloved by so many people. And I knew that, the support was on my side, and the letters to the editor that were pouring in were 99-1 in our favor. And when we put this online on a petition, we we got 2,500 signatures in the first day. Like I knew, in politics, there's, when something has almost unanimous support, it's really just a matter of time. And it seemed to me at that point that the pressure was on me not to screw it up, and just kind of to wait it out. And it so happened, usually they take about 18 months. This one took 3 years, but if any of your listeners are make your way to New York City ever, you can find George Carlin Way on West 121st Street. It runs between Amsterdam Ave and Morningside Park, and you can go up there, get your picture taken in front of it, and then walk across the street, and you can stand in front of the building where he lived.
Like I said, this is probably one of those amazing success stories that someone is able to just basically, no, it's happening. Come to terms with it. And I have to agree with you. I mean, George Carlin is a synonymous name with comedy alone. And I agree with you. How does he not have a street? That blew my mind. I remember seeing a story on the news years ago, but I guess, or when it all started, I guess I just never really clued in. But then I was just reading things like, oh shit, this is the guy who did it. This is kind of awesome. Like,
yeah.
Well, that was on my podcast. Holy shit! Like, I mean, fucking. Well,
that was the other thing about it was New York City is always the number one comedy city in the world. There's never been a poll. There's never been an opinion of anybody's that said that there's a better comedy town than New York City. We have like something like and at any time up to 18 or 20 fully functioning 7-night-a-week comedy clubs, not to mention all the rooms and all the comics who come from here, and Saturday Night Live and the UCB and everything else. And George Carlin being the greatest stand-up comic, arguably, certainly in the top 3 on anybody's list. Even if he hadn't come from here, he deserves a street in this city named after him. Then the fact that he actually grew up here and stayed in one building forever, it was just a no-brainer, is what it really was. It was just a no-brainer. In fact, the very first thing I did when I got the idea was I reached out to his daughter, Kelly, via Facebook to ask her permission to do it, and I was fully expecting her to get back to me and say, thank you, but, somebody's already on this, and here you can help them out if they need a volunteer, but we've got it covered. I was really surprised that nobody had thought of it at this point.
And like I said, it's kind of mind-blowing to me, really mind-blowing to me, so that's why I kind of got a little bit starstruck. I'm like, holy shit. It's like, we've had some guests on the podcast that's done some things that are really interesting to hear about, but to have someone say, no, George Carlin Way, I got it, that's fine. And then we even got to the other parts that you'd warmed up the audience for a lot of different shows that I was like, holy shit, okay. I had to sit there and soak it in for a minute, and then I was telling the Mountain Man here, he's like, oh yeah, he's done this and this and this, and I'm like, what the? Okay, I have no material.
Never heard of me, that's the kicker.
Well, and a lot of it, like I say, is, your warm-up for Daily Show, Nightly Show, Millionaire, appearances on, you said, on the website, it had Saturday Night Live as well, you worked on?
Yeah, Saturday Night Live wasn't such a big deal. That was just, I was a featured extra one day. Years ago, a friend of mine, Dean Obidala, who's a comedian as well, worked for Saturday Night Live for years. I think he did research and stuff for the Weekend Update. And he just asked, he said, hey, if you'd ever be interested in being an extra on the show, they're always looking for people, I'll give them your headshot. And I was like, yeah, that'd be an awesome thing to do, and so I did one episode. I was an extra in 2 scenes. I looked at it just as a fan of the show, and it's better than getting tickets to a taping. I got to hang out backstage, and I knew Dean. I knew a couple other people on the show, so had a really cool weekend hanging out in their dressing rooms and just being a part of the show. But that's not a big career milestone or anything. That was just kind of a fun little cool thing to do.
Nice little tack on the resume.
Sure.
Absolutely. It's not, and everyone's like, well, I worked on Saturday Night Live. You're like, oh, well,
all right.
that's pretty awesome. Hey, you want to be an extra on Saturday Night Live? I'll just stand there. That's fine. Like, I mean, I can be the guy that get hit by something. I don't care. Whatever happens. You were opening for Colbert as well. And now he's moved off into his own different show. So are you going to be following, or how's that going to work?
Well, I don't know. I will. I'll be a part of the show. I'm hoping on air. Because it'll be a late night show, so they'll have stand-ups. Assuming that Colbert follows somehow the format that's been established for so many years, he may do something completely different. But assuming that they do the format where there's an occasional stand-up comic and there's some sketches and stuff. It's not out of the realm of possibility to expect that you would see me doing some things. Nothing's guaranteed, nothing's granted. But I do know the producers. I do know most of the staff of the Colbert Report we're expecting are going over. I was one of the warm-up guys, so I don't know what they're going to do about warm-up, and now the nightly show has happened, and that only happened in the last 2 weeks that I even found out that I was going to be a part of that show. So now I've got a steady gig on the nightly show, so I don't even, you can't do both. They take pretty much simultaneously. So it's a hard thing to say. I'm hoping that I'll be able to maintain my job at the nightly show and then, get to do some stand-up and some sketch or some other things here and there on Colbert. I'm just excited to see what he does with it, because the guy's he's a damned genius, and he's wildly talented, and I think, frankly, that the character that he was doing after a while, it was, holding him back a little bit, and I think you're going to see in the next year just exactly how much and how diverse his talent really is. And I was able to see it firsthand in the warm-up. I would warm the audience up and then bring him out, and he would spend 7 to 10 minutes playing with the audience, and just seeing what he could do and how fast he was on his feet. I'm 100% confident that guy is the real deal, and is going to dominate the late night landscape.
Definitely. I mean, I was totally stoked when I found out he was taken, and I was like, oh, who's going to take the role now? And I'm like, are we going to have another Conan situation? I don't know if I want to go through that one again.
Right.
Right. That was just a whole different story. But, like, Colbert, I'm like, you know what? I can see it. I can see him doing it. And it just, like, it grew on me more and more. Here's a good question, though. Like, you worked with Jon Stewart and Colbert. So,
yes.
What was your favorite show of the two that you liked working on?
I would say maybe Colbert had a slight edge, but maybe that's just because I'm nostalgic for it and still a little sad that it's gone. I love working for the Daily Show, and I still occasionally will be there, although it's much less. I started with them, and then I kind of moved over to Colbert, and now that I'm the guy at the nightly show, maybe I'll do the Daily Show twice this year, maybe, who knows. The Daily Show has everybody on both of those shows. They're staffed by, and I should say the Nightly Show now as well, all three consummate professionals, nice people, not a bad apple in the bunch. I traveled with the Daily Show to the presidential convention, so I spent 2 weeks on the road with them, so I really got to have a lot of good one-on-one time with the crew, doing the show and then having dinner and then, late night parties around the pool and at the bar every night. So I had some really good bonding time with those guys. And then Colbert was just so great, for no other reason, because he was so great. And both of those shows, John and Stephen, totally led by example. And you could see, it's like they say how a fish stinks from the head down. Well, you could say that. I don't know if there's a good way of saying that other than lead by example. You know what I'm saying? There's no
Flower
positive way
smells
of saying
good
it.
from the petals up.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
flower smells nice.
I'm gonna have
But
to try
those
and use
guys-
that one now. I'm gonna
Yeah.
have to write that one down.
Those guys both just lead by example, and they've both been really. And I gotta stop saying both because Larry is the same way. All three are just really cool, nice people to work for who have staffs that are dedicated to them and dedicated to putting out the best product that they can. And it's just, I was a fan of The Daily Show since it debuted with Craig Kilborn all those years ago, and I didn't start even working for The Daily Show until Colbert had already been on the air for like 5 years. So I can legitimately say that I'm, a wild fan of all of these guys, and I'm just lucky to get to be a part of them. It has that feeling like you just, you're a fan of the Yankees, and then one day you just get a phone call from nowhere. We need a relief pitcher every once in a while. Could you come on in and suit up? It's that surreal feeling I get.
That's definitely a good analogy. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
I couldn't think of any other way to put it.
No,
That makes
you've
perfect
got
sense there.
Some of the top people in the industry in late night television, and you're working with them all.
Yeah.
But,
I'm really cool. Right now, I actually have this nice little claim to fame, which is I'm the only comedian out there who has warmed up audiences for all three: Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert, and Larry Wilmore. I got all three of them. I've been hired by all three. That's the only little claim to fame I have, I think.
Well, I mean, you've done, from what we've listened to so far in this conversation, done a lot more than you give yourself credit for. Done a lot more than me. That's good. That's good. Let's go back to. I have to agree with your point about New York City and comedy clubs, because I don't know if you've ever been really north of the border, but I tell you, we have nothing here. It's kind of dry. Like, we have Yuck Yucks, which has hit or miss.
There's a number of Yuck Yucks franchises throughout Canada, but we've got one here locally in Niagara Falls and Toronto, a couple others. But there's some big headliners that come through. But
sure.
But they always tend to touch the Toronto show more than anywhere else.
Montreal, you guys have the Montreal Comedy Festival.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You can't really compete with that.
Comedy-wise, fantastic lineup every year.
Mm-hmm.
But
go ahead. I've not done much Canada stand-up wise, but it's it is what it is. Whether you're, I kind of think of Canada in the same way. I just think of any other city in America. It's like, there's New York City and there's LA, and that's where all the industry is as far as getting you on television and making you famous. So that's where the concentration of talent is. But then we all go off from there or start out somewhere else, and then you go off each weekend, and you're maybe 1 week in Cleveland, Ohio, and the next you may be in Miami, and the next you may be in Ontario, or you may be in Montreal or Toronto or somewhere else. So there's road places, and then there's the city. And I've always heard good things about the Yuck Yucks trains. I've never done them, but I would certainly like to at some point.
We do have, like, the one in Niagara Falls has housed a lot of headliners over the years.
Jim Carrey got his start in the Yuck Yucks, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
But I noticed that when it comes down to the chain, I guess, of Yuck Yucks, is that if anyone that's more of sounds horrible to say, like a mid-card or higher, it always goes to Toronto. Mm-hmm. And the Niagara Falls Yuck Yucks actually has a lot of history in it, from my understanding. So it's kind of heartbreaking for us. But then we cross the border, and then you have, I think it's the Laugh Factory in Rochester, I want to say it is, and they seem to get a lot of good shows.
I do. I've done Rochester. Just last May, the Joke Factory in Rochester.
That's right.
And then I used to do another club in Rochester that's gone. And there's a lot of cool road stuff to be done. But yeah, you're right. When it comes to the road, you're better. You're going to get better luck and see the bigger guys in the in the bigger cities. That's just the economics of it,
Right. But, I mean, I find myself, I always tend to gravitate to more people that are not known, because they tend to be the people that actually have the good jokes, and they're not overdone, and it's not the same skit. Like, I mean, such comedy, like, I like Pete Holmes and Dave Attell. Dave Attell's awesome.
Dave Attell's fantastic.
Fantastic comedian. Oh, I mean, I'd never really heard of him before, and I listened to a podcast called The Nervous Podcast. If you'd never listened to it before, it's with Chris Hardwick, and he was on there. I'm like, holy shit, this guy is hilarious. And then next thing I know, I'm downloading everything. I'm like, this guy is great.
I'm working with him tomorrow night.
Are you?
Yeah.
Oh, I would love to talk to David Tell.
David Tell is top of my list of favorite living stand-up comedians. He and Brian Regan, I think, are my favorite, and I edge him out over Brian Regan only because I've seen him so much, and he's so funny. I'll tell you a thing about David Tell, because I've opened for him on the road before, and he'll do a club, not always, but he will do this, where he'll do a club for a weekend, and he'll do maybe 5 shows over 3 nights or something like that, and he won't repeat a joke, and he will crush and crush and crush 5 different shows without repeating himself. He's that good. He's like a savant, like a joke machine. Amazing.
One of my favorites when he was doing his Insomniac tour.
Yes.
He made a stop at the House of Blues in Vegas. Dane Cook, Greg Giraldo, and Sean Rouse.
Yeah, they taped that.
Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. Like, all those guys in Attell. I've been a big fan of his for a long time, but working with him, that's wonderful.
Yeah, we're doing a fundraiser tomorrow night there was a comedian in Seattle, Washington, a young comic who just last month was hosting an open mic and was performing on stage, and a dude came up and attacked him on stage with a baseball bat and nearly killed him. Yeah. It was a situation where this happens when you're in the lowest levels of comedy, and you're in the open mic scene. A lot of people think they can do comedy or think they're comics and try it, and often I wouldn't say oftentimes, but it happens that some mentally unstable people use that as an opportunity to be mentally unstable. And this particular guy had gotten He'd gotten banned from every club and every room in Seattle because he billed himself as in these open mics as Jesus Christ, and he would perform, I think, half naked with a Bible in one hand and like a dildo in another. Yeah. So, which is this weird, crazy performance art shit that you will see in open mics every once in a while, and it's offensive to some people who choose to be offended by that kind of stuff. It's just not funny, and it kills the room, walks the room, and ruins the night. So he gets banned from everywhere. So he gets banned from and told that he can't come and do this open mic anymore. So what does he do? He shows up with a Louisville Slugger and just walks up on stage and bashes this poor bastard's skull in. He ended up having to have... They didn't know, he's got 3 little kids, this guy. He doesn't, we don't know they didn't know if he was going to survive. Then they didn't know if he was going to ever walk again. They had to do emergency brain surgery on him. They had to put 2 metal plates into his head and 40 staples and sew his ear back on. And, so we heard about this. It's one of those things that just kind of all of a sudden shows up on your Facebook feed, and people are posting. And so I saw it, and I just said, anybody, just reposted the article, said, anybody here in New York want to get together and do a fundraiser? And so we got a club called the Broadway Comedy Club, and they've opened their showroom for the night to us, and we get all the ticket sales, and they're even giving us, and this is unheard of for a comedy club, they're giving us a chunk of what they make that night on the booze sales as well. And and so we were able to put a lineup together with David Tell and Rich Voss and Bonnie McFarlane and Ted Alexandro and Jim Mendrinos and Eddie Brill and myself. And if I don't know when exactly this podcast will air, but it's this Tuesday, February 10th, here in New York City at the Broadway Comedy Club. And it's there. If anybody would like to come, it's going to be an amazing show. And we're, I was able to speak to this comic. His name's Dylan Avila, and I just told him that this is one of those things that could have happened to any of us, because it's not, like I said, it's not uncommon to deal with somebody who is crazy and schizophrenic or just mentally unstable when you're, especially at that open mic level, and. Any of us could have been hit with a baseball bat, and it's just kind of there. But for the grace of God go I thing. So it didn't take more than an email to a guy like David Tell. Just said, "You hear about this? We're doing a fundraiser," and he was like, "Yeah, I'm in." All these guys, yeah, no problem. And we're hoping that if we can sell the room out, if it's not a snowstorm, if maybe. I told this guy, I was like, "Hey, don't count on anything. You never know. We could get snowed out. It could be a bust. We could have 5 people. Who knows? But if we could raise a couple $1,000s, I'm sure that's just a drop in the bucket of what this guy's medical bills and lost wages and rehab and everything else are. But we wanted to do our part. So."
Yeah, and we definitely applaud you for that. To answer your question that you had, somewhat comment, is that this was actually airing on Tuesday, so it will be up first on Tuesday morning.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, hopefully that'll help. I really hope it does.
It means if you're listening right now, you still have a couple hours. Get your ass on an airplane. New York City.
February the 10th. There's many Tuesdays in February.
Anybody in this area can drive. There's a little bit of a lead foot.
But I'll tell you right now, though, where we're located, which is about, I don't know, how many hours?
7-hour drive?
7-hour drive?
I'd say
it's
6
about
and a half,
freezing
maybe.
rain right now.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully that doesn't get down to you. That's definitely a great cause.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, I'm going to keep saying, wow, congratulations. That's all I've been saying this entire podcast.
And it goes to show, you guys have all been there. You've been in that open mic. That's how you all got started at some point. And now you're just, passing it back down.
I mean, I've heard horror stories. I've heard a couple of snippets of hearing things that can happen during a comedy show, like people throwing beer bottles and just being a bunch of fucking assholes. Or
sure.
Well, it depends on your comic. You don't want to be like Kramer either and do that. I remember that skit years ago. Oh, that was fucking horrible. But and he still thinks it's funny. But I mean, to hear something like that, that's just sad. I really hope that the person's being prosecuted to the fullest of the law. Like,
oh yeah, he is. He's in jail and he's going to be prosecuted full extent. And the good news is that it looks like Dylan's going to, is going to pull through. He's actually already. It's only been a month, but he, like I said, he had the emergency brain surgery and all that, and he's actually since been able to get up and perform again. So he'll be back. And he's just a young guy. I think he's been doing comedy for 4 years, so he's doing what you should be doing. He's hosting open mics and he's getting his stage time, and we all pay our dues, and he's just paying his in a much more horrific way.
Well, we'll definitely put something up on our page, and and hopefully that will attract some traffic to you guys. Like, I mean, we started off as just a small little page, and then next thing I know, we have a podcast, and we have all the people that listen to us. I don't even know why, but they do, and they think we're funny on the odd time. So, I mean, we'll tell jokes, and and from what you were talking about, this comic guy that had the baseball bat situation or baseball bat therapy or whatever the hell he thought he was doing. I've heard of comedians going too far, and you'll have the ones that'll drop certain topics that are taboo, but that's a little bit extreme. That's all.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm always, first of all, very very aware whenever I'm talking about this particular instance. I've done a couple of interviews to promote our thing. The one thing I won't call the guy is a comic. He's not a comic. He's just some batshit crazy performance artist. He was just a schmuck, just a real lost soul. Who hopefully in prison he'll get whatever psychiatric mental treatment he couldn't get on the outside, and this will never happen again.
Or other horrible things. Yeah. We can pray. Yeah. It's not like in Canada. You go to jail in Canada, they're just like, well, that just means 2 months of not playing hockey here. Pretty much. Like our judicial system in Canada is kind of a joke. I will never fight anyone on that. But also, here's a good question for you. Like, you talk about a lot of comedians, and George Carlin is definitely a favorite of mine as well. But a lot of people defy it because if it comes down to Carlin versus Pryor, Pryor is a very funny person, and I obviously would never have seen Pryor, but I mean, who would you rather go see, Carlin or Pryor? Because I think that's a good question.
Well, I did see George Carlin once and was awesome. Yeah,
he wins already.
right?
He already won.
I see. For me, it's like, you know, it's like who's better, the Beatles or the Rolling Stones.
Right.
It comes down to your taste a little bit. Richard Pryor, I think, was amazing, and nothing but respect for him. My tastes are a little bit more towards the George Carlin style. My own comedic style is a little closer to that. I think George, one thing is a larger. He leaves behind a larger body of work. George Carlin did something like 17-hour-long specials, and they're both wildly talented, wildly inspirational comedians that every comedian working should study both of them and learn as much as they can about their styles and their techniques and take their cues from those guys. And you know, they always are the two names right at the top. Bill Cosby's right up there, regardless of his current state of affairs.
That's a taboo topic now.
Regardless of his current state of affairs, you can't take away
the comedy.
You know, and that's the thing, though, and that's one thing that really pissed me off about that whole Bill Cosby thing, is that a lot of people have forgotten all the good things he's done in his life. And all the, you know, not to sound sappy, but the joy he brought to everyone. And I tell you, when he did a show in Hamilton recently, there was people there protesting, obviously, because everything's happened. He went outside and said, you know what? You guys can protest. That is your right. And he went back into the show, and then people brought it up in this show, and he said, guys, I understand that you're protesting. However, this is a live show, and I want to make sure people get their money's worth. And they all were quiet and said, he was being very respectful about it. And see, that, and me, that gives points. I mean, especially with all the heat that's on him right now.
Yeah. You know, this is it's so strange, but when I was doing, not to name drop, but I just told this same story to Jon Stewart 2 weeks ago. We were backstage at the Nightly Show, and they were doing the Bill Cosby episode of the Nightly Show, which was the second night, and I was just standing at the monitors, and Jon Stewart was there, and you know, we're friendly a little bit, and so we're chatting, and I said during a commercial break, I said when I was doing the press for the final run of George Carlin Way, when we were doing the press that last week, I was asked probably half dozen times, if you were to do this again, who'd you do it for? And I was like, I answered Bill Cosby each time. I said, you know, I thought that the street in Brooklyn where the Huxtable's brownstone exterior was shot, I thought that would be a cool place. And if I were ever to do it again, would be there. And that was just 3 months ago. And it's amazing how much the story can change about somebody in 3 months. And, you know, Jon Stewart just, you know, basically looked at me and just said, well, this is all your fault then.
No, I know we've talked and definitely touched on Carlin quite a bit. I'm just curious as to who your other major influences were when it came to comedy.
Well, when I started out when I was a kid, it was... you know, in the 80s, Jerry Seinfeld was huge, and he's definitely an influence. Dennis Miller is a big influence, or was a big influence, for his intelligence, and both the one thing that Jerry and Carlin and Dennis Miller, you know, one thing they have in common is they never ever played down to their audience. They actually seem to. It was almost a prerequisite with those guys that you had to be a relatively intelligent human being in you know, to get what they, especially with Dennis Miller, to get his references and stuff like that. You had to be literate. You had to be a smart person to get that. And I really appreciate that about Dennis Miller, especially, was that, you know, he didn't go for lowest common denominator. He didn't dumb himself down for his audience. He expected his audience to keep up with him. So he was a huge influence, and Lewis Black was. And then, you know, once I became a comic and started studying it a bit more and I got into Woody Allen's stand up and Bob Newhart's stand up, and then as I was working the door, I worked the door at a club called Stand Up New York for a couple of years, and just sat at the desk tearing tickets and delivering French fries and stuff, and watching the shows night in and night out. And we're talking about 12, 13, 14 years ago now, but every night I was watching Greg Giraldo and Dave Attell and Jim Norton and Jim Gaffigan and Todd Barry and these guys, and they were all such influences on me because I got to actually watch how they wrote and how they crafted a bit and edited it and how it would change from one week to the next, and it was from those guys where I really learned the structure of it and actually how a stand-up comic writes and stuff like that. So I've been a fan of it since I was about 6 years old, and even to this day I have contemporaries. I have guys who've been doing it just as long as me who I'm a fan of and who I learn from. There's so many great comics out there. And the thing is, every time I get asked that question, later on I kick myself because I forgot to mention somebody. And I'm like, oh, son of a bitch. But.
Definitely. I mean, there's so many great comics out there nowadays. It's hard to keep up. Like, I mean, my taste in comedy are all over the map. I listen to some comics like Greg Giraldo, who has no problem pushing envelopes in anything he does. And then I'll have other comics, I can't remember his name for the life of me. He's like a very PG-13 comic, and just his delivery is what makes his comedy good. And then you'll have to go back to the classics.
Guys, like you mean like a Dimitri Martin type?
Shit. He did an act called The Me Monster. I have to look it up. But his delivery is what sold the show. Everything is so PG-13 and like a sarcastic. Let me see if I can find that, because my friend actually, Brian Regan.
Brian Regan, yeah.
Brian Regan. He did that, his whole skit on the Me Monster. My friend, it's like, you got to listen to this guy. And that was going through a time where I was watching a lot of those Comedy Central roasts. And you had like the Amy Schumers, Greg Giraldo's, like, and Lisa Lampanelli, and how dirty they were getting. I was like, that was funny at the time. He goes, listen, it's not going to be nothing like that. You have to give this a shot. And I watched the entire show. And I was like, holy shit, this guy is great.
Like, Brian Regan. Yeah, absolutely. I think I mentioned him earlier.
Yeah, you did. I totally forgot his name. That's my
fault. Absolutely. He's a genius.
But
a genius.
Another very clean Bill Engvall.
Yep.
the
With the Jeff Foxworthy troupe and Blue Collar.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Another big one of mine. I'm a huge fan of Eddie Izzard.
Oh yeah,
actually.
Sure.
Just in how he goes off, and he's got his own little style. It's a little bit different, but
yeah, a lot of great guys out there. There's so many, and with the internet now, and with cheap digital cameras and free editing software, it's such a golden age for comedians, because we don't have to, and it's not realistic to be only a stand-up anymore, financially. So we're putting out so much more product, and you're getting to see comedians not only do stand-up, but create sketches and put them up on their own sites or on Funny or Die or something like that, and do podcasts and do short films and do all sorts of different stuff. It's such a great time for that, and to be a fan of comedy and to be a fan of people, and you're just constantly getting exposed to new, very funny people. It's such a great time.
Definitely. Like, I mean, even with podcast, I remember years ago when I heard about podcasts, what the fuck's that? Oh, it's something that Kevin Smith does. Okay, whatever, it's Kevin Smith. But now it's grown, and like I said, even with our page, we're just kind of like, we'll just try it, see what happens. The next thing you know, it's like, holy shit, I got to renew my license because apparently we're good.
Crap.
People are listening.
People listen. This has been my whole thing, because I released my album last month. What I've been doing to promote it has was I would just reach out to podcasts just like you guys and say, hey, if you ever want to have a guest, I'd love to do it. And then some get back to you, and you do their show, and it exposes me to your audience. Hopefully some of my audience, once I tweet the link out, will find you guys. So it's a win-win. And then The album is on iTunes forever. Your podcast is on iTunes forever. This one interview, somebody could be hearing 15 years in the future and still go buy my album.
That's very true.
As opposed to spending an hour going in and doing morning drive time radio.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I think podcasts are amazing, and I've been listening to them since day one. Because they were, once they came out, it was great because you're driving to gigs. You got a 6-hour drive. You got a bunch of podcasts to help pass the time. It's awesome.
I agree. There's been so many long ass drives to Windsor, which is 5 hours away. When I had to go to Detroit a few times for a lot of for work and stuff like that, or family matters, there's nothing to do. And then I was just downloading all these podcasts and it just filled up time. And you know what? I'm very happy that that we've grown and even going back to your original comment about just technology alone, this is absolutely the best time to be a comedian because there's so many different avenues that people can find you. That before, instead of I saw this guy at this comedy club, he's not there anymore. I don't know where he is.
No way of tracking him down.
No contact. Now it's fuck this. It's called the interweb, sir. And now I have his webpage, I have his Twitter account, I have all this, blah, 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 blah. It's definitely fantastic to grow your audiences now. And that's why we always look forward to having anyone on the podcast that is funny, that can keep up with our fucking shenanigans. And and that goes with our podcast, is that we're off-topic and offensive since 2012 because, we try to have fun and we understand that some people may not like some of our humor. And I was like, you know what, maybe we should make sure that he's going to be on board with some of our humor here that we have, and then we just watched the couple skits and then listen to your podcast. I'm like, oh, perfect, we're good, we'll survive. Because
he's not going to be offended.
You can ask Mountain Man here. He was making fun of me because I'm like, holy shit. Am I going to fuck this up or something? Am I going to say something? He's going to go, fuck you, and hang up? I don't understand. Here's a good question for you. If you could tell us one story, what is the best story you had on the road with any of the comedians? Because there's always that one story that weighs out everything else that happened on the road that shouldn't have happened, or just something you got in trouble with another comedian. Because I know who was always notorious for always getting in trouble. I can't remember who it was, though. I think it was Matt Mara. Is it Matt Mara that always gets in trouble when he's on the road? Or Jonah Ray? I always get them mixed.
Jonah's
it's probably Jonah. Yeah. Is there any stories we can tell our audience?
Sure. All right. Yeah. Here's one story where I could have gotten into quite a bit of trouble.
Uh-oh.
No. So it's a pretty wild story. But basically, here's what happened. I'm on the road with The Daily Show for the presidential conventions last year, and
this is already starting off bad.
I think we were in, I don't remember which city it was, Charlotte or Tampa. I'm feeling like it was Charlotte, but I could be wrong. Now, you don't really get to appreciate the amount of security in these cities until you've actually been there and experienced it. It would take over an hour to drive from our hotel, sometimes 2 hours, from our hotel to the TV studio. Each day they had giant metal portable walls that would stretch for blocks at a time, and within these walls they could slide doors and close doors. So what they were able to do is redirect traffic at the drop of a hat. They would just slide a door closed, and all of a sudden, right in front of your car, your street is shut down, and you have to find an alternate route. So we were only 5 miles from the studio, but it could take sometimes 2 hours to get to the studio. And there was every type of law enforcement in the state and in the country was there. Everything from FBI and CIA all the way down to the local cops to everything, and every corner, and there was people there, and it was such tight security. And we were right next door, our studio, to where the convention was, and the night that this happened, Bill Clinton was speaking. So we were. So I guess I made it Charlotte. So anyway, I on that week on the road with The Daily Show, one thing that made me very popular with everybody else is because I'm a road comic for so long, I had come up with an ingenious way of smuggling marijuana onto an airplane and getting it down. So I had just plenty of pot for the whole weekend. Now, some guys had thrown some into like the into like camera bags and stuff that came down on trailer trucks and stuff, but not a lot of people had pot, and I had a lot, and I had a really ingenious way of doing it and getting it onto an airplane, and and people were amazed at how I was doing it, how I was able to do it, and all that. So anyway, there's a man. His name is James Dixon, and people call him Baby Doll. And Baby Doll is a talent agent in Los Angeles, and he's one of, if you're a comedian, he's one of the most powerful agents in the world, and you just want to meet this guy once. I mean, his roster is Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel and Adam Carolla and Carson Daly and a few others, but that, this is who he is. And he's there with The Daily Show that week because he's John's agent. And I become friendly with him because we're backstage and we're talking and stuff like that. So anyway, Baby Doll and I are walking back to our rental cars from the studio, and he had heard about my story, or about how I smuggle pot onto an airplane. And we're just walking, and I'm just loving that, this powerful agent is interested in my story, and we're talking. We're not breaking eye contact. We're walking down. He's asking questions. So then what do you do? And they never think to look there. And I'm like, no, the TSA never thinks to look. Why would they? The dogs, we keep walking, keep answering questions. It's a couple of blocks, and we're walking amongst, we weave our way into a crowd of people, and we keep walking, and we keep talking about how I smuggle pot onto the airplanes and how I've outsmarted the TSA. And then at one point, I'm not making this up, we look up and we have realized that we have wandered right into a group of 15 uniformed TSA agents.
Oh, fuck.
who had been over at the convention center handling, doing all the metal detectors as people were going in to see Clinton. And now everybody was in there, so they were done for the day and walking. And they'd just been walking, listening to me talk about how I smuggle pot onto the plane and how I outsmart the TSA agents. And they just laughed at us. And we just kind of just kept our heads down, made it over to our cars, and we just burst out laughing. And we were like, Dixon was just like, he goes, if we had ever written that into a script and I tried to sell it, nobody would ever believe it and buy it that it really happened. But to this day now, one of the most powerful agents in the country, I can get him on the phone or whatnot. I just remind his assistant to say, I'm the TSA pot guy, and he remembers me to this day.
That's awesome.
Oh
man, that was good. That was good. I think you won the internet on that one.
But the question is, have they picked up on your tactics?
You know what? The thing is, I really haven't done it much since. No, the times I have, no, they haven't. But now it's just so much easier. You get to a town to get it. It's it's practically legal, so it's not nearly as difficult. And one day, when it's completely legal and I write my autobiography, that'll be a chapter in it, and I'll be able to tell exactly how I do it when it's all said and done. I noticed
you left those details out.
Yes, I did. I'll tell you off the air, but I leave those details out because it still has to work.
Fair enough.
Magician's secret.
That's right.
Well played. I never really thought about that. I just flew for the first time last year. It was quite a experience. I don't think I would have even attempted that, let alone I had a hard time getting on the plane. I'm deathly afraid of heights, so it's like, and my friend's like, don't worry, we're just flying to Cuba. 3-hour flight on a freaking budget airplane called Air Transat.
Okay.
Like, what the hell you name an airplane Air Transat? Transit's out? Like, I don't get it. But I mean, that was good. That was
fantastic. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I gotta ask, because I know you're doing your podcast on movie previews. I gotta know, did you see the Fantastic Four trailer?
No.
I was kind of hoping.
Yeah, no, you know what the thing is, now that we're actually actively in our taping our episodes, I go out of my way to avoid movie trailers when I'm not, because I want to see them for the first time and give my honest to God opinions first viewing of it live on the air. So I show up, if I go to the movie theater, I'll show up 15 minutes late, so I miss all the previews. If it's something we haven't done, we've only done 4 or 5 episodes yet, and it hasn't come up, I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Does it look awful?
Oh, you're gonna have fun with it. I'm gonna tell you.
You have a field day.
Oh God, it's horrible. Because there was a lot of previews that came out recently. You had like the Fast Furious 7, you had Jurassic World, and we saw all these trailers coming out. And we're like, okay, we don't give a fuck. We just want to know what's happening with Fantastic Four, because this franchise has been doomed before. And we saw the trailer, we're like, fuck,
they're killing it again.
Like, they just digging it up, putting another bullet in its head, throwing it back in the grave. It's just absolutely horrible. So we're going to look forward to that podcast, because I have a feeling we're going to see it pop up on iTunes. That's for sure. All right, well, thank you for being on our show. It was absolutely a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
We really appreciate it.
Sure.
Definitely check out your album. I've already forgot the name of it.
The Intentionally White album.
That's why he's hired. So if I forget shit, he can drop it for me and go, it's this. We'll make sure that our audiences, we tweet this out quite often. We'll make sure we tweet out, and hopefully we can, hopefully get you some sales there. We saw it on iTunes ourselves, so I'm probably going to end up buying it now.
Yeah, well, thank you guys.
We'll think about it.
Thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate it. It's been a fun podcast to be a part of.
Oh, definitely. And we extend the invite to you anytime you want to. If you have something new coming on, just let us know, and we'll work out some details and pop you on.
Beautiful. I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
No, thank you, and thank you for being part of our podcast tonight. You have yourself a great day.
Game over, man. Game over.
Thanks for listening to the Droids You Are Looking For podcast. Stay tuned for next week's podcast.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.